A man goes to the grocery store. He suddenly realizes the clerk is his daughter. He angrily yells at his daughter. He asks her why she isn't at school at this hour. This completely confuses the girl. At that moment, the boss comes over to ask what's happening. David says he is the girl's father. On hearing that, the girl calls him a madman. David becomes anxious right away. He scolds her for calling her dad a madman. The girl fights hard. The boss witnesses the scene. He warns him to leave or he'll call the cops. So David lets go of his daughter. He lets her go home with him, but as he reaches the door and sees himself in the glass, he is left speechless. He's shockingly at tea now. He sees himself in the car glass. His face shows sheer disbelief. Then the car window rolls down. The driver asks, "Do you need something?" David hurriedly asks him, "How old do I look?" But the driver just drives away. The shop owner and his daughter locked up and called for help. Seeing this, David had no choice but to leave. He then went to his close friend's house, but his friend mistook him for a thief, and he knocked him out immediately. Just as Kevin picked up the photo ready to strike, he saw David really matched the photo. When David woke up, he told Kevin that he had turned 18 years old. Kevin asked him, "Since you became younger, what do you plan to do?" David asked Kevin to be his dad so he could return to school. And so, David enrolled in high school as Kevin's son. He became classmates with his daughter, Sophie. Upon seeing David, he suddenly recalled yesterday's scene. "You crazy person."
Hannah, can you speak properly?
During class, David suddenly received a call from his wife. Still not used to student life, he stood up to answer the phone, but he was called by the teacher. His wife pushed him to set the divorce date soon and told him if he was late for the second divorce, it counts as giving up custody. David certainly disagrees. His wife says he never cares for the kids. David arrives at the door. He sees his daughter through the window and says, "I'm closer to the kids than you think." After ending the call, David goes to the bathroom, suddenly notices someone locked inside, opening the door, and it turns out to be his son, Henry. He angrily asks his son who did it, but Henry doesn't recognize young David at all and warns David not to say who let him out, or the bully will retaliate. David, feeling uneasy, follows him out. He wants to ask Henry directly, but his daughter stops him in the hall. Sierra invites David to the rooftop. She also brings two girls for backup. Sierra tells David, stay away from her next time, but David isn't scared at all. He tells her about Henry being bullied. Did Henry get bullied again? David sees his daughter is aware Henry is bullied, asking her why she didn't tell that. Sierra thinks he's gone crazy wanting to be a dad. After that, she turns and goes, but he turned back to give David a sign. This stunned David. Is this still his obedient daughter? His daughter must be elsewhere. After Sophie learned her brother was harmed, she planned to confront the bully, but David got to the cafeteria first to find his son. He asked why his son wasn't shouting out, but Lucas said it was shameful. Just then, the bully strolled in with a few friends and came straight to their table. He mocked Lucas with a few jabs. He bashed Lucas on the head with a ball. Then he swaggered off. Seeing his son bullied, David couldn't hold back.
Hey!
Come here! The bully threw the ball at David, but he caught it with one hand. The bully demanded the ball back. David pretended to move. The bully covered his head in fear. The bully felt humiliated. He approached, ready to fight, but a teacher rushed in to stop him. The bully left, spouting threats. Afterward, David grew more furious. His son had been bullied, and he couldn't fight back. Frustrated, he turned the corner to light a cigarette, only to find his daughter smoking here too. He immediately yelled in anger. This startled Sophie. She thought it was the teacher, but Sophie told him to mind his own business. Just then, Sophie seemed to see something. She suddenly turned and ran away. At that moment, the teacher showed up and slapped David. David turned around to find he was an old high school classmate. And the teacher asked who else was here. So David revealed that it was his daughter. He even said to properly discipline her. Watching the teacher constantly hit his daughter, David was heartbroken. He grabbed the teacher's hand and said a verbal warning would suffice. The teacher thought that made sense. David thought it was his wife who came. He hurriedly turned away. The teacher asked Sophie where she got the cigarettes. Sophie said she stole them from her mom. Hearing this, David grew uneasy. He stood up to scold them for smoking. At that moment, Zoe looked at David in disbelief. She slowly walked towards David. David was cornered. The teacher blocked it fast. He said, "This isn't school approved. He looks just like your dad did when he was young." David wanted to hide and start anew. His secret was near to leaking. Luckily, Kevin arrived soon. He falsely claimed this was his son. She wondered why Kevin's son looked exactly like David when he was young. The teacher then suggested they hurry back to class. Only then did they leave. That evening, Zoe was troubled by her divorce from David. Her friend invited her out. They ran into a high school mate. The man had always had a crush on Zoe. He offered to drive Zoe home after the date. Even after Zoe declined, the man cheerfully ran out to his car. Zoe and her friend came out of the store. Her friend noticed Zoe's bad mood, so she suggested Zoe walk forward with her eyes closed, count to 10, then gaze. Whoever she sees first must be her date. So Daisy walked forward with her eyes closed. She recalled life's struggles. Her man drank and smoked daily. They were on the verge of divorce. Young Pierce pushed her aside. Her friend behind her answered a phone call. Daisy did not notice she wandered off. Just as a car was near her, a hand suddenly grabbed her. It was David. This scene felt so familiar to Daisy. At that moment, the man from earlier drove up. This man was also David's high school classmate and also his current teacher. The teacher said he'd drive Daisy home. David firmly said no. He argued it was unsafe home alone. He asked the teacher for a ride too. The next day, Daisy exercised as usual. Suddenly, she recalled yesterday's scene. So she hurried home. She took out a young picture of David. Gazing at the photo held tight, she thought back to the present come in. Mary seems to have figured it all out. So she angrily went to Daniel's house. She asked if he was David home. David was startled. Could he have already been recognized? You are his son, right?
His son? Why do you say that? You must be David Ho's son.
Mary missed who he was. She mistook him for David Ho's illegitimate son. She even took out a photo of young David to compare. Daniel hurriedly explained, his mom looks a lot like David Ho. Mary didn't buy it. Meanwhile, David's phone was right in his pocket. David suddenly panicked. Daniel quickly told David he was almost late for school. That made David hurriedly leave. He stepped out to take the call. Mary asked him if Eugene was his son. David replied that Eugene is Daniel's son, but they look exactly alike. Mary just didn't believe it. Seeing David silent, Mary suddenly thought, that day, David saw his daughter taking a taxi to school with her classmate. Back in the classroom, he overheard several girls saying their dads don't give them pocket money. David thought, my daughter is smart. But soon after, Sophia then showed her classmates how she asks for money. Dreams? Sophia had claimed it was all due to good dreams. David quickly paid for good luck. Nearby, David heard this. He instantly felt furious. He approached the group. He lectured them fiercely. He said, how dare you cheat your dads out of money? He added they take a taxi to school daily. That's $160.01 a month. The girls were shocked. At that moment, one girl said her dad was a taxi driver, so she didn't spend on the taxi. David felt embarrassed right away. So your dad is a taxi driver? But Sophia found him annoying. She stood up and left the classroom. At that moment, a girl told David, it's her dad that meddles of old fossil. Old fossil. After it's done, a girl thinks David is right. From now on, I won't take a taxi to school. It turns out being handsome really makes one hard to dislike. Sophie looks at them, speechless. After school at night, it suddenly rained outside. Sophie recalls she forgot her umbrella. David sees the scene. He rushes out to buy an umbrella, then stands in rain with umbrella for his daughter. When David leaves, Sophie sees he still has an umbrella. This leaves Sophie very puzzled. Might have an umbrella but not use it. It turns out David keeps that umbrella for his son. The next day, David sees his son being bullied again. He approaches Henry and asks why he endures it. Next time they bully you again, just fight back. After saying that, he finds the bullies, decides to teach them a lesson. Strike back. Let's have a fight. Soon, news of their fight spreads across the whole campus. Sophie quickly runs to check after hearing. On the playground, the two decided to settle it with a basketball game. Teams of two. If David wins, Sam will stop bullying Henry. If Sam wins, David will get a beating. But what Sam didn't know was David was really good at basketball before. Soon, David's team quickly won the game. And Henry regained her confidence during the match. Sam could only leave in disgrace. But what David didn't expect was, frustrated, Sam took it out on Sophie. David witnessed the scene.